We need to talk. Important conversations about faith, family and finances. Join our team for some honest conversations. And now, to kick things off, your host, Dan.
Okay, welcome to the We Need to Talk podcast, episode 2. Today, our focus is on family, and my name is Dan, and I'm the creative pastor here at Discovery, and I'm joined by Phil, our neighbourhood pastor, Jody, our senior pastor, co-senior pastor, and Doug and Mel, our campus pastors. So welcome today, guys.
Thanks Dan.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
it's great.
Just if we could just go around the room, I've got a few questions to ask. Just so this podcast is a space to go a bit deeper in what we're learning about each week in the We Need to Talk series. So this week is all about family. So I'd love to hear a little bit about you guys. First question is, if I were to give you guys an elephant, what would you do with it?
My boys would quickly mount it and take it for a walk.
There we go.
Yeah, they're 4 years old, so.
I'm thinking I might mount it and take a walk too.
I've been on an elephant before, and giving them a bath is awesome fun.
Yeah, I agree. When we were younger, we went on an elephant, and having them in the water at the same time is heaps of fun. Yeah. So take them to the pool.
Take them to the pool.
Yeah, it'd be pretty interesting to see others' reactions to you walking an elephant down the road.
Yeah.
If you guys are driving alone in the car, what do you listen to?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big U2 fan, so I crank up the Joshua Tree for sure. Yeah.
I listen to nothing.
Yeah?
Absolute dead silence. Yeah.
Yeah, why is that?
I think it's just a really downtime for me, because I think life is so busy and so full that when I get in the car, I just need to take a moment.
Decompress.
So, yes.
Yeah, I do. I love doing that as well. Like sometimes I catch myself like, I've just driven in silence, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm the same. In the afternoon, I drive in silence because I know the minute the kids get in the car, it's going to be on for young and old. So I like the moment just to be quiet and prepare myself for the afternoon.
It depends on the time of day for me. If it's the morning, I might listen to worship music because I'm holy like that, you know. And then,
we always knew that about you, Phil.
And then if it's afternoon, coming home, I might listen to some Afrobeat jazz or something like that. You know, it depends.
You heard it here first. Afrobeat jazz. Love it. So
we'll put a link for that in the show notes.
I love it. So across the last week on Instagram, we've been putting a few polls to get some what's the word? Find out what people are.
To get inside people's heads.
Yes, get inside people's heads. There we go.
Yeah.
About family. So one of the polls we put out was what's the best time to talk to your kids? You guys, what's the best time do you find to talk to your kids? Is it morning? Is it the car trip? Is it the dinner table, or is it before bed?
Anything earlier the better for my boys, because they quickly deplete energy through the day. So if we're going to have a serious conversation, definitely in the morning at breakfast. That's a good time for us,
I think for us, we use the dinner table for the serious conversations. However, I will say, if you ask the kids, it's always they want to talk right when you're ready to go to bed. That's when the big conversations come out for sure.
Yeah, I think when the kids were growing up, I think in the car because they're boys, so I think it's very different between boys and girls. So when I was taking them to youth or doing things like that, it was like conversations because you didn't have to really look at each other. You could just drive in the car. So that's when the good conversations were happening. So it was really intentional about taking them to places so that you could have that time. As adults, however, you have to be, you just have to take moments and say, hey, when can we have a DM? So...
Yeah, with young adult kids now, like our boys at 24 and 26, one of the best times to chat with them is kind of that happy hour sort of time. When we get home, we might have a glass of wine. The boys will come and join us, and we'll sit around the kitchen bench and have chats before dinner. That's a really good spot now.
It's good.
Yeah.
Well, that's the idea of this series, the kitchen bench, kitchen table chats, the we need to talk moments. So that's good. Yeah, when there's tension in a family, in your family relationships, do you tend to fight, flight, or freeze?
I'm a peacemaker, So I hate it when the harmony gets disturbed in family life. So my immediate response would be a freeze or flight kind of response.
Yeah.
And then I have to just intentionally go, right, I've got to come back to this and have this conversation and resolve it.
I'm the same, and I'm sure Doug's going to say the same as well. The freeze or flight. My wife's much better at engaging in conflict when it needs to happen, particularly when we've got two 4-year-old boys who like to hurt each other at the moment. So then Val's much better at intervening than I am. So yeah.
Yeah, for anyone who's familiar with the Enneagram kind of profiles, the three of us are all 9s, so we're all peacemakers. So yeah, I'm the same as Phil and Jody, but Mel's a 7. It's all about fun. So how do you do it, babe?
I think I confront it. And the word fight is really sounds aggressive, but for me, it's actually taking the time to go, actually, I'm the adult here. How do I respond in an adult way? So, and show grace and show, because there's conflict that can happen even with adult children, which happened just the other day. And you go, how do I not, what's the word? In the sense of interrupt that because they're adults, but how do you say, hey, hang on a minute? We need to have a conversation about this.
We need to talk.
We need to talk. Hashtag we need to talk.
Yeah, it's tricky because you, as you're saying, the Enneagram thing, all of us are wired in a certain way, but then you're trying to be a good parent and also put that lens on it. And so you might be naturally inclined to fight, but then do you want your kids to learn that that's the right response to it, or or just shelving it and sweeping it under the rug? Yeah, so it's there's all these dynamics to it. I feel so. Yeah. So on Sunday, Doug preached a message: relatives plus restoration equals real life. Cool equation, Doug.
Cool equation.
I think that's the first time we've done an equation as our sermon title. So
There you
well done. So if you missed that message, stop this podcast, go and listen to that. It was a great one. So the main idea about what Doug spoke about was that families are a space where everyone belongs, and belong is one of our values here at Discovery. And so conversations within families should be grace-filled, and God's ultimate plan is for families to be restored, especially with Him. So in saying all that, I'd love to hear a bit about the families you guys grew up in, and whether they were spaces where you felt like where everyone belonged and where the conversations were grace-filled and things like that. So, Doug, do you want to kick us off in that space?
Yeah, sure. I grew up on a dairy farm in South Gippsland, so shout out to anyone in Gathertown. I loved being on the farm. I grew up in a Christian home, so faith and conversations around faith were always a part of my life, which I think has been a real kind of bedrock foundation for me. I have a younger sister and a younger brother, so I'm the oldest of 3, and so it's all good. All good.
Great.
Yeah.
Mel?
Yeah, so I am the youngest in my family. I have a twin brother and an older sister and an older brother as well. So, yeah.
If you have a twin, are you actually the youngest?
Yeah, because I am by 5 minutes.
Oh, by 5 minutes. Good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when we were growing up, however, I always wanted to be older. So I used to pretend to stab him so he would die so I could catch up. And so that I would be older than him, because that's what you want to do when you're young. You want to be the oldest.
Just be on the lookout for
And
that,
then-
Phil.
and then after-
Family with
But then
twins.
After
With
6
twin
minutes,
boys?
6 minutes, you'd resuscitate him again and he'd be alive.
Okay.
Our boys want to be the youngest because at the moment, whenever we play board games, it says the youngest starts first. And
Yeah.
Dad's like, I want to go first.
Yeah. So grew up in a Christian family, but faith was very much a Sunday thing. It felt very, when we grew up sort of thing, it felt quite awkward to talk about our faith. So I had to learn how to do that really naturally with being a parent, because, it was a bit strange. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to say this first. I love my family, and it was a really challenging family to grow up in. So in my family, I'm the youngest of 2 girls. A lot of dysfunction in my family growing up. My parents were both high-functioning alcoholics. And then, so on the outside, life looked really good and successful business owners, but behind the scenes, lots of marriage challenges going on and mental health issues there that weren't spoken about or identified. So my family history has some mental health issues in it. My father committed suicide when I was a teenager. So yeah, family life was challenging growing up, and yet that very same family was the family, we weren't a Christian family, but my parents intentionally sent me to a Christian school, sent me to Sunday school at the local church and the local girls' brigade. So put me in 3 Christian environments, I think in an attempt to instill some good morals in us as kids. Still something I'm fascinated about why they chose to do that. Family life looks really different now, but back then it was challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, I come from quite a dysfunctional family as well, and my mother and father weren't Christian, so I never grew up in a Christian home. And when I was 8 years old, my father left home, and actually left home with my mum's best friend, who was the next door neighbour. So it was a really challenging time for us. And my brothers moved to university when I was still like 8-9 years old. So yeah, so then when my mum died as a 13-year-old, it was really tough because I had to go and live with my father and this woman I'd been taught to hate, So it was disruptive, to say the least, as a teenager going into my early adult years. But yeah, I found Christ as a 19-year-old, and my family life has been much better since. And yeah, there's been a lot of restoration and healing that's come through my family life. So yeah.
So have you taken like these sorts of experiences now into your families that you're creating now?
Absolutely. You see the stuff you go through as a kid and you think, I wonder how much of that I'm projecting as a parent into the stuff that I do now, because you learn how to be a parent from your parents. And so I've been really conscious that I don't want to be an absentee father, because that's essentially who my dad was. He was a workaholic, and then he wasn't there when I was growing up. And so I find myself thinking, what can I do really intentionally to be a present father to my kids in a way that my father wasn't? My father was really great as a provider for the family. He was very generous, and particularly in my later years with him, he was a great example of what a good father is. He brought people together. He was great at that. But there was just some real dysfunction in those early years. He just struggled to be a parent. So I've been really trying to think, there's lots of stuff I'd like to adopt that my dad did, when it came to us being kids that had grown up a bit. But, there was stuff he struggled with in his early years. So, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, it's great to hear that, like, you can separate that out and it's not just all bad or all...
Yeah, we're all broken people at the end of the day. And, we're just doing the best we can,
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for the vulnerability in that space. That's like, super helpful and really, really fascinating, interesting, and and it's kind of it's an encouragement to us to see, Jody, where you're at today and your family and the way you and Matt lead us as a team and as a church, as almost like parents in a way. So it's just incredible to see that. So obviously we've got a broad spectrum of parents in the room here. So Phil, newborn and 4-year-old twin boys, and then Jody, you've got teenagers now, and then Mel and Doug in the young adult space. Phil, what does family time look like for you in this kind of really young phase?
Yeah, like a quality family time for us is like adventure. So like my wife and I love adventure anyway. We love exploring new places, and so do the boys. So we went to like Alinda Play Park recently, but the boys had more fun playing in the forest next to the park than they did actually in the park. And so making a den or doing something like that, going to the beach, it allows their imaginations and creativity just to blossom, and it's great for us as especially if we've got coffee in our hand as well. So time outside, that's generally a good family day for us.
So Jody, you've then moved into the teenager phase now, out of the young kids and primary school phase. How has that family time thing changed and that shift for you?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
one
mate.
of the biggest things, I mean, I would agree, it's creating those shared experiences, but it's also creating shared experiences where everyone's off their screens. So as you get to that age when you've got teenage kids, all of a sudden everyone has their own device, and it's very easy for everyone to be on that device all the time, parents included. So we're trying to create times as a family where it might be a city adventure where we go in and spend the night and we go out to eat together. Our kids really love food, which helps, but we love to have shared experiences around food. Yeah, intentional about being off screen so that everyone's actually present together. And then I think the other thing that we're noticing as the kids are getting older is trying to create some one-on-one experiences with them. So I'm trying to find some shared interests with our son Finn, who's 13, because I'm noticing that I know as he gets older and older, that natural connection isn't just always going to be there. I'm going to have to be intentional about creating things that he and I enjoy to do together, because he's going to become, before I know it, he's going to be a 16-year-old boy, and I really want to maintain that close-knit connection with him, just as I do with our daughter Lucy. I guess because we're both girls, it's a little bit easier to find common things to do together. So yeah, we're just trying to be really intentional about the one-on-one as well as the family of four stuff.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's
So,
Yeah,
I've
super
pulled the
important,
tennis
yeah.
racket out again, and this afternoon I've got a date in the backyard with Finn and the hockey stick. He wants some hockey pointers, so I'm reliving my childhood hockey days with him at the moment, so that's going to be fun.
love it.
It's great.
And Mel and Doug, you guys have got young adult boys and men. Yeah,
They
They're
are
men.
They are men.
They are men.
They're very
Large
tall men. I think for us, because our older son moved out when he was 23 and only recently has come back for a stint back at home. But we had to be really intentional when he moved out, to do family dinners. And being boys, they're, I don't know, because we haven't had a girl, so I'm not sure how to parent a girl. But with boys, you actually have to be really intentional with reminding them about family date night, and you have to actually really... if it's not important to you as a parent, then it won't be important to them. So you actually have to be really intentional to put it in the calendar, remind them, say, hey, looking forward to seeing you. Family dinner night is on Monday nights, and to make it not that it's every week or anything, but make it intentionally so that for us, it was every fortnight. And we tried to really hard to keep to that for us. And there was heaps of grace for them if they had something on. But for us, it was just trying to be really intentional to do family dinner because, even now he's moved back home and it's sort of like that stage of they're out and about, they're doing their own thing. So you really have to be intentional, and make that decision to, stop and go, hang on, let's gather together and do family dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you raise these kids to be adults and then they go ahead and do it. And then you go, oh, hang on a minute. We're missing out now. That whole point about being really intentional with them is just super important. And, because especially, I think, like you said, Mel, with boys, there's a bit of this, I think that disconnect for them happens pretty quickly once they get to this young adult stage of not seeing the importance of actually being in family still. Like they're trying to work out their identity in the world with their friends and their social lives, multiplying at an exponential rate and all that sort of. They're working, so they've got another realm of life to be in. So to actually be intentional about pulling them back into family life again is really, really important.
Yeah, that's good. So one of the things you've spoken about in your message is that their families are more than just a nuclear family, so a family of faith where everyone has a role. How do you guys cultivate these kinds of spaces in your lives?
It's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, I've wrestled with this with having small kids because from an early age, I want them to know that I want to teach them to become independently dependent on God, to correct Francis Chan. It's something I never had as a kid. So I've been wanting to how can I make this fun to engage with my 4-year-olds in in a daily devotion that isn't going to seem boring, or they're going to want to go and play with the toys or something. So something that's really worked well in the last year has been the YouVersion Discovery Bible app for kids. It's the Bible app for kids. And it's just so helpful because the boys can engage with it, and tap things and make sounds, but it also talks through the good news, and it starts at Genesis and works all the way through to Revelation. We're going back through it again now because they love it so much. And there's little tokens you can pick up along the way. So this has been great for the boys because they actually really want to do it every morning at breakfast time as a way to talk about God. And so we leave with a simple truth from whatever it is. And that's been super cool because they want to learn about the Bible.
I'm just thinking, Dan, one of the things that as our kids are getting older and becoming teenagers, we're trying to be really intentional about our house being a house that's an open house, so that, we want our house to be the house where they want to bring their friends and where they know that they can invite their friends anytime they want. There's always food there for them to eat, that they can come and be part of the wider experience of our family. So it's, beyond our nuclear family, it's an open house that anyone can come and be part of, and that it's a safe place for their friends to be, where their friends feel comfortable. And I was thinking about this the other week. Lucy had a birthday party and she had a whole bunch of her girlfriends around, and just watching them sit at the table and talk freely and openly. And I thought, this is the kind of house that we want to have, where they feel really comfortable just to invite anyone over, and they know that they can do that there's an openness there beyond our just immediate family.
It makes me think about like the church being kind of this, we talk about it being a light on a hill, like sitting on a hill, and so like how can our houses, the families that we create be those kind of little lights for our kids' friends. So that's cool.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's that modelling piece. I think that's just so important, especially as we've talked about with your family experiences, Jody and Phil, having parents that actually weren't there or were struggling to do life for themselves. There's so many kids and families out there that aren't the perfect nuclear family. There's parents that are missing. There's relationships that are just so destructive and manipulative that people and kids. And it's not just about kids either. It's about adults who find themselves in families who need that space to be able to grow and develop in a healthy way. And I think for us, especially thinking about the Christian household, how do we model that really well in our community, so that kids who are coming home from school or their parents that we meet, can actually experience some of that really healthy kind of relationship that we can model in that space.
Yeah, I just having this flashback memory of when Matt and I first started dating. We were only 16 when we first started dating, and I can remember going to his house the first time for dinner and just being fascinated at how different his family functioned to mine. Being in his home, listening to the way they spoke to each other, watching the way they sat around the table. It was just such a different experience than what I was used to, and I loved it for so many reasons. And we forget that sometimes because our family life and the way we function now just becomes our normal. So it's just what we do. But we forget that sometimes when you invite someone else into that space, they might not have ever experienced a functional family experience before, and so it's like completely foreign, but in the most beautiful way. And it's so appetizing, and I think that's something that motivates me to think about what kind of family environment are we creating, and how can we invite other people into that, because I remember not having that same experience growing up.
It's a really good reminder about the importance of this, like the small day-to-day things, like sitting around the meal table might be something that you find a real value. And so, you do that, and then when other people come and join you, it's just natural. It's not a forced thing. And
there's a whole bunch of research now that actually demonstrates that having meal together with your kids is actually conducive to better education in later life. There's evidence to demonstrate it now. And so many of those families that have broken homes typically won't have dinner around in the evenings. And so, there's actually research that demonstrates the benefits for children in later life because of it. So, it's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for us too, it's really modelling how to do life together as well.
Yeah.
And so with the boys, when they bring friends home, because they're all adults, they don't always want to hang out with you and everything. But yeah, we had a friends of Jacob who came and watched us, because then they saw us how we interacted, and they go, we really love how you guys are interacting together, and how they just, we didn't even know we were being watched, you know, and how we spent our afternoon after work and how we debriefed our day. It goes, we want that. We want to be able to, you know, actually have that in their life as a couple, you know. So it was nice that Jacob could bring his friends home and we could give them some space, but they could also see that, there's more to, So I think it's good.
It's so good. So, Phil, we're highlighting It Takes a Village this week. And so can you tell us more about what It Takes a Village means at Discovery?
Yeah, sure. So It Takes a Village is an initiative we ran a couple of years ago, or started a couple of years ago at Discovery. And it's particularly to raise awareness of God's heart for vulnerable children in the out-of-home care space, and how the church can respond to that in the out-of-home care space. And when I say out-of-home care, that's when a child is placed in a home overnight somewhere else because it's not safe to be in their home and their normal home environment. Right now, there are around about 9,000 kids in Victoria who are in the out-of-home care situation, and tonight, in any given day during the week, there'll be 60 kids who'll be sleeping in a hotel accommodation somewhere because it's just not safe for them to be at home. And so I think there's a big call for us as a church to really respond to that. And so we've started this initiative to raise awareness of some of the need, and also to support the carers that are already within our church as well. I'm proud to say we've actually got 26 people in our church who are either foster carers or kinship carers, representing 15 households. And that's just a huge celebration of our values as a church around belonging, around restoration. Like Psalm 68 verse 6 says, God places the lonely in families. I can't think of a more lonely place for a child to be than in a hotel room, away from everything they've ever known, away from their family. And so the reality is also that in Victoria, the number of kids going into care is increasing. We've got, since 2018, there's been a 14% increase of kids going into out-of-home care. But the reality is carers are dropping. And so there is a huge need for carers right now. And I think that God is calling us as a church, it's called the church in our country, to really respond and to step up and start having conversation with God to say, what's your next step in this? Because not all of us are called to be foster carers, but we're called to do something. And so It Takes a Village is a play on the words that, you know, it takes a village to raise a child, but I think it takes a whole church community to raise a foster child. And I think there's a big space for us to be able to say we want to support the foster carers in our church, as well as do everything we can to help a child have a consistent placement where they feel the love and consistency and predictable presence of family life in an environment where they typically haven't. So
Good. Yeah, Doug, would you like to share a bit about your story around foster care?
Yeah, so when I think I was probably 15, 16, my parents felt the need, the same kind of need. They'd heard some statistics about kids who were in out of home care, and they said we've got a pretty stable family and a decent sized home. We could actually do something practically about that. So they went through the process of becoming foster care parents, and we had two kids come and stay with us, a young 8-year-old girl and a young boy who was only probably 6, I think, and both from really dysfunctional families, and they came and stayed with us for about 6 or 8 months, I think. Wow. Reflecting on it now, it was like an incredibly rewarding time, but at the time for myself and my siblings, it was pretty challenging. Like you have a stable home and you know the boundaries of your own family. You add 2 strangers into that mix, it actually becomes quite challenging. But I think the development in us as a family and the growth to actually open our home to somebody else, to welcome them into our family, actually helped to make us a better family at that point. I think we were really, and I think it's about that, you know, we can do something. And for that point in time, it was about making sure that these two kids were cared for. And I think, so we tried to, you know, figuratively adopt them as brother and sister for the time that they were with us. And I mean, who knows what effect that time had on their life or you know, their kind of existence or the way that they would think about family now, but hopefully that would have been a really good experience for them. So
I think as a church and as Christians, it's probably one of the most profound things you can do as a Christian is that in terms of outworking your discipleship. If you can be a foster carer or support foster carers, it's just such a celebration of what God considers to be really important, to take care of children. And the you know, as Mariah Weston, our former colleague here at Discover, used to say, the foster care is hard, messy and complicated, but the gospel calls us to hard, messy, complicated things. And it's a huge celebration of the gospel when we accept a child into our home.
Like if you're listening to the last week's episode, that was the main point about how can we have a living faith, how can we not just be sentimental about that. And so, you know, that really ties into that of, faith in action. So what would you say to our listeners who are thinking about potentially fostering? Like what's the next step that they can take? Like if they're just like, you know, maybe, and like where could they go next? How would you?
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage that them to get in touch with myself, neighbourhood@discoverychurch.com.au. We've got some resources that we can share with them. We're exploring a partnership with Hillsong City Care, which run a very similar program called Our Village, and they actually have some resources called First Steps, which is a series of videos to help people determine whether or not God is calling them into be foster carers. So it's with a biblical perspective to foster care. And so we can share those resources with them. They can watch them in their own time. That would be a good start. We have just run an info session on Sunday. And so we run one of those every year, but I would encourage people to reach out to link up with some foster carers in our church already. We do foster carer gatherings every term as well. And so if people are interested in either getting involved in foster care or want to support some foster carers in our church, that'll be a good place to start as well, just to sort of get to meet some others and talk to them about it.
That's great.
That's great. So looping back to the message from Sunday, some of the action points, Doug, that you shared were how are we building an awareness of God's heart for people in the conversations we have as families in our everyday week. Jody, do you like how would you respond to that? Like the idea of building an awareness of God's heart for people in our conversations with our families.
Yeah, I think, we at Discovery, we talk about every heart being found in Jesus' story, and we believe that everyone has a story. And so I think one of the things, at least, that we're trying to do in our family and with our kids, I mean, a lot of the time they're in environments where they know everyone and everybody knows them. But as they're getting older and becoming more independent, you know, Lucy just got her first job, so she's about to go into a whole new environment and meet a whole new set of people with a whole set of different ideas about the world. And trying to really equip her and empower her to be a young person that can recognise that everyone has a story and everybody's on a journey, and that, how do we not make assumptions about somebody's story and about the journey that they're on, but be somebody that's open-hearted and grace-filled and is able to invite people into your story that you have and celebrate the story and the journey that person's on as well. So I think, I think it is about inviting our kids and the young people in our world into those spaces of seeing that, everybody has a story, everybody has value. Their story might be completely different to yours, but looking for the God threads and those opportunities to share faith and to be a bold witness in the spaces where they go. That's something that we're thinking about a lot at the moment as a family. I don't know if you have anything to add, Mel, but...
Yeah, I think for me it's demonstrating in your everyday life how you can be Jesus to someone. You know, I really think that's important. Like, you know, I go for a walk every morning, most mornings, and without a doubt, most mornings I bump into a guy who walks his dog, and he's just up for a chat. I think I'm his first conversation of the day. But, you know, I'm on a mission. I need to go for my walk. I've got half an hour. I just want to go for my walk. And God keeps reminding me, no, he's got a story. He's got, I could be that person for him, where a people of peace, where I can just show him a bit of time, because we've all got the same amount of time in the world, like 24 hours. So if I can give him 5 minutes of my time to have a chat, then, I think that's showing Jesus to him. And I think it's really intentional. So I get to demonstrate that wherever I go. And so when we're out with our boys, or when we're with our men, when we're out doing that, they see that. Yeah.
One of the things, we've been talking about this a lot lately, but I often think of Melinda Dwight from Alpha Australia. She comes to our church on a semi-regular basis to talk about Alpha, and one of the things she talks about in the context of Alpha is moving people around the clock face of faith. And she talks about that idea that we might not always be the person that leads that person to Christ or prays the salvation prayer with them, but it could be as simple as showing someone the kindness of Jesus when you're at the checkout in Coles. That speaks to them and is a demonstration of the love of Jesus to them, that just moves them one tiny bit further around that clock face of faith, because you just never know where someone's at in their journey, the other people that God is bringing across their path. And so, I think living with intention and not missing the moments. Sometimes we get so busy in our task-orientated lives that we're just bulleting through, that we forget to notice the people around us that Jesus is putting in our path. And so trying to just slow down. The one thing I'm trying to do anyway, I'm just trying to slow down just a little bit and pay attention to who God might be bringing across my path and what kind of conversation that I could have with them that would be life-giving and help maybe express a bit more of Jesus to them.
Yeah, because it is exactly that. It's being intentional, and even it sounds funny, but taking the time to pat dogs along your walk, I tell you, it's just a game changer for people. If they give you permission to pat their dog, you get a step into having a conversation with them. Where otherwise they would just walk past you.
Our boys used to be fascinated by the fact that I'd have conversations with total strangers if you're standing in a line to get into the movie theatre, or something like that, or on the bus. You just say hi to someone and strike up a conversation, or you notice something and you talk to them about that, and that used to fascinate our boys. They're going, why do you do that? I'm just going, it's because there's an opportunity there. And I think we've all had experiences where we've actually recognised that we've missed an opportunity which could have been super significant for somebody in that space. And just modelling that openness to other people, I think, is just gold. And I think that's where, the Neighbourhood Initiative, is just so important, because it helps people to see that there is an opportunity to make significant difference in a child's life, in the family of where that child comes from, potentially. You just never know how God is going to use that. And I think, like Joji said, the threads of God weaving stuff into somebody's life. And if we can be a part of that, why wouldn't we? You know what I mean?
I love what you said, Phil, about with the It Takes a Village initiative. It is a whole church initiative, because I know that there'll be people listening going, we just don't have capacity to foster a child. But I love that there are so many ways that as a church, whether it's prayer support, whether it's intentionally coming alongside a family that's fostering and providing meals, or there are just so many ways, aren't there? And it doesn't matter whether you're a young adult, whether you're a teenager, whether you're a family. Everybody can really get on board and be a part of it.
Not everyone's called to be a foster carer or respite carer, but we can do something. And that's a big part of what we're trying to promote as a church. There is lots of ways you can support foster carers in our church.
That's great.
It's like that ad on TV at the moment, All or something. And I really like that. Like the idea of it shouldn't just be all or nothing. Like, at least do something. Take one step. And I love that, what you guys just shared about using those opportunities to speak to me. People, like, my kids are always at me like, why do you have to talk to people? Like, at school drop off, I'll always try and have a chat to someone else. Just use all the opportunities, because I know how important it is. The kids are trying to drag me away. Why do you have to talk to people, Dad? So I think that's so important. Lastly, the one of the other questions was, how has the love of God in your life prepared you to overflow into someone else's? Phil, do you want to share on that one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, kind of linking back to foster care again. My wife and I were respite foster carers back in the UK before we moved to Australia. And, I never really wanted to do foster care. Like, I'll be honest, I just didn't think I was the right person for it. And, I didn't grow up. I was the youngest in my family growing up, and I didn't have any real interaction with younger kids. So I just thought, I just don't think it's going to be for me. But my wife has come from a background in childcare, and, she felt really strongly that, God was calling us into this. I thought, okay, well, let's explore this. And I remember going to this info session for foster care, and I remember having a conversation with God and saying, look, if this is something I'm supposed to do, you really need to get my attention in this session. And we used to live quite close to Heathrow Airport in West London, and the Hillingdon Council, which we were going for the info session, were running it. And they shared a statistic with me which blew my mind, that typically every day through Heathrow Airport, around 30 kids are trafficked through their security system that they don't like, that they catch.
Wow.
And there are many more that they don't. And they're typically put into respite or emergency foster care in the Hillingdon Council. And I, as soon as I heard that, I said, that's all I needed, God. That was enough for me to say, there is a role for me to play here, because that's astonishing and that's something I can respond to. So yeah, I'd invite people to have a conversation with God on what it looks like to serve in this space. Yeah.
That's good. So the main idea around Doug's message was that God wants restoration in family relationships, which ultimately leads to restoration in relationship with Him. So the encouragement this week for all our listeners would be, who do you need to say we need to talk to help you seek God's plan for restoration in your life? Thank you guys for joining us today.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Really appreciate what you've all shared in this space. And I hope it's an encouragement to everyone listening to this podcast. So next week we've got Matt Destry speaking about finances. There'll be a panel including Beck and Tim Lambert. And on the podcast, Matt, Beck and Tim will also be joining me. So that should be a fun one, talking all about finances. Does God care about my money?
Very cool.
Is money bad? Yeah.
Juicy moment.
Yes, so we'll jump into some interesting stuff. So if you liked this podcast, please rate it, give us some comments, and it just helps to boost the podcast in the algorithms and gets us out there. Remember to hashtag We Need to Talk on all your channels, socials, and everything. Post about what you've been doing and where you've been saying to God, we need to talk. And have a think about what's one thing from today's episode that you can take, that you can change. What's one conversation you can have with someone? What's one dog that you can pat? Or what's one thing that you can take and put into action? And we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to We Need to Talk. If you would like to support the podcast, please consider leaving an honest review and star rating wherever you're listening. It only takes a few minutes and helps us get the message out to more people who need it.